Hello. Welcome back to the Let Me Ask You This podcast. I am your host, Ebie Hepworth, and I'm so excited. I know you could be anywhere, and you're choosing to be here, and that means the world to me, and I truly don't take it lightly. And so I am excited. This episode is with my girl, Jalyssa Richardson, and she actually asked me to be on her podcast the week before we recorded this episode, and so it was so special because I got to see her 2 weeks in a row, and it's just so cool when you meet with someone and you basically, like before, we're just like, Holy Spirit, do what you want to do in this conversation. And then both conversations, one was on her podcast, the other was on mine, the one you're about to listen to. And they were just so different and just so multifaceted. And so with that being said, Jalyssa Richardson is an incredible mom. She's an incredible wife. She has 5 boys. She is a stylist. She has always showed up on social media in just such a supportive, powerful way. She shares her heart beautifully. She is one of those girls that from afar I've always just felt so supported by, so loved. And I just admire the way that she just keeps going into life with so much hope and just such a fresh joy. And so, this episode I'm excited for you to listen to. We really kind of unpack a lot of different things. Her story is unique and rare. Her story of resilience is beautiful. And so, without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode with my dear friend, Jalyssa Richardson. Jalyssa,
hi.
Hello. Okay, this is the Let Me Ask You This podcast. We've been friends for years, cyber friends.
Yes.
I got the gift of being on your podcast last week, and oh my gosh, dude, I just want to sit on the couch with you. We just want to hang out. We want to talk about all the babies. You are a gift. Will you, for people who have no idea who you are, will you give us a little bit of an insight of who you are, where you come from, the babies, the whole spiel?
Yes. Well, I'm so glad to be here. The tables have turned. Last week, I had the privilege of having you on my podcast, which I have to just say, first and foremost, that the messages that I'm getting every day, oh my gosh, I told you, you wrecked me on the podcast. I left the podcast. I was like, I need to be a stronger woman of faith, immediately. And everybody who listens to it feels the same way. You are just really compelling women of God to just press harder. And so
happy to hear that because I felt frazzled.
I know you said that.
I feel I was talking in circles.
No, it was so powerful, friend. It was so good that I'm having a conversation at least once a day with women about the episode that you were on. So glory be to God. He showed up. He showed out. He did his thing. And I'm so grateful to be here. Okay. I'm Jalyssa. I am a 31, almost 32. I'll be 32 in a couple months and I'm really pressed about it.
Wait, why?
Because I feel like I'm
Are you
still settling
that
into 30. Age? No, I'm okay with aging, but I thought I would be different in my 30s. And I'm I still feel like I'm 23.
Cooler or what?
Just more level, more mature.
Dude. If you figure out the secret to maturity, let me know.
No, I'm so childish and I play too much still. And I'm my life is in shambles.
That's what Jesus says, stay a child. That's who we
Yeah, seriously. So I'm almost 32. I am a Southern California girl, but I am living in the hot Phoenix desert right now. I'm a military spouse. I've been married to my best friend in the entire world. I was going to say since I was 14. No. I met him when I was 14.
This episode is about child marriages.
I met him when I was 14. We've been married since I was 20. So we'll celebrate our 12-year anniversary this year.
Dang.
I know. Wild. We have lived a beautiful, full life together. We've lived 20 lives in the last 12 years. We've given birth to 5 beautiful boys. Which has been so fun. In the midst of that, we've had the privilege of taking in other kids and being able to just labor alongside Jesus, really, to sow into other people who are in need. And that's been fun. All boys, though. Let me just say, I have 5 boys of my own.
Testosterone.
So much testosterone. I have 5 boys of my own. We've taken in boys. So it's just at this point, I have testosterone seeping through my own pores. Okay.
100%. Do you feel like you offset it with, because you're the girliest chick I know?
I know. You know, it's so funny because I am in physical appearance. I really but I grew up with 5 brothers. I was raised by my dad, not my mom. So in all other things, like I don't want to watch a chick flick. I don't want to watch a rom-com. I don't want to like go out and go shopping. Funny, right? I'm a stylist. Like I want to like binge Marvel, Star Wars, basketball, football, wrestling. I want to wrestle. I want to be outside. I'm like,
I love
this is a facade, okay? And I love all things. Like I'm working on my office space right now and it's like I'm making it like Barbie girl vibes.
Yeah.
I think I do that to push the estrogen, like the feminine energy into my home because it's so boy heavy, you know?
100%.
And so that's my family.
Like the Lord is like, hey girl, surrounded you by men, raising men, like you have an assignment.
Absolutely. And I think in a way, it's almost like God's kindness because I have such a burden on my heart for women and that like particularly young women like flock to me. And one time we were sitting with one of our friends and he's like a giant in the faith to us. And he said, you know, I wonder if God didn't give you girls or a girl because he wanted you to stay focused on your spiritual daughters. And I thought about that. Like, I accept that actually. Like, I'm okay with that. And I think there's this unique privilege in being a boy mom. Also, my husband has a ton of brothers and they are living with us in and out, on and off. I have my own brothers. And I think there's this unique privilege in like showing up and showing them like how to honor a woman, how to hold space for a woman. You know, me, I'm a big personality. I'm like a big presence. And like, I hope that in that fact, my sons, my brothers, my husband, like all the men in my life see like women are of such high value. And I'm so valued by all of them that I think there's a unique assignment in that as well. 100%. You know,
you've raised the standard for them and you've also shown them what it looks like. The kind of woman. That's crazy. Yeah. What's been your biggest challenge with being around men all the time?
Oh man, I think
you're like this now.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, my husband's like he's way more neat and clean and
he's military. He better be.
And so he's like, my kids are like that. So that's been nice. And my brothers are all pretty boys. So, you know, but what has been really challenging is I don't think I realized until more recent years how much I need women, like the presence of women. And so I think I've like had to fight for something that for some people is just given. Like we were talking last week about you and Birdie and like just the fun days, the fun moments. Yes. I realized that sometimes I'm suppressing like the feminine parts of myself to blend in. Like I did that when I was growing up. I was like playing Yu-Gi-Oh cards and video games. And when really like, I probably wanted to be learning how to do makeup, but instead I'm such a communal person, right? So I'm just like blending in. And so I feel like I've had to really fight for my likeness in my family, you know, because I can blend in with the boys so well, but I'm like, I'm a girl and I'm just a girl. Like,
oh, come on. Know? So do you feel like, okay, what's been the biggest joy then, I should say? Because I have a lot of stuff.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't know what's not joyful.
People, like when they're like boy moms, it's like their identity. Like their license plate, they've got like all the boys on the back of the van. Like, do you feel like you're like, I am freaking proud of like.
Yeah, I do. I am proud to be a boy. No, you know why is because I don't know, this could be controversial because I know like motherhood is such a huge blessing and I acknowledge that, but I have just never subscribed to motherhood being the banner over my identity. And so I don't see myself as I'm a boy mom, like I'm wearing it on the thing. People always buy me gifts too that say boy mom, like all the time.
Return.
Like, all the time. And I'm like, I actually like am just Jalyssa. And then I'm like all of those other things. And so I don't wrap myself up in that. And I also like think that there came this point where I acknowledge that I don't have to like kind of like shift into like what I was sharing a minute ago into like all the boy energy because it's so important that they acknowledge how to like come alongside and tend to a woman. So I started making play dates with them, with my friends that only have daughters.
Oh, come on.
So that one time we were living in Albuquerque and a little girl, our bearded dragon escaped. I know it's weird, right? And we were like, we put him in the backyard sometimes to get sun. He was missing. So a little girl came and rings the doorbell and she's like, do you guys have a lizard? Because we found this giant lizard in the street and my mom thinks it's a pet. And my sons were like, it's a girl at the door. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, they're just so
Don't be weird.
Right. Like I realized my friends joke, like, you can't be friends with me because now all my best friends only have boys. And I was the mom first before all of them. So I started intentionally trying to make the boys have play dates with girls with like no brothers. And in doing that, that has actually been my greatest joy, is teaching them how to honor women. My husband said one time, somebody asked my son, like, oh, do you have any cute girls in your class? And my husband was like, well, he probably has beautiful friends, but girls are the same as boys. They deserve to be respected and honored and valued, not seen as like something for our affection. And I think like the Lord yoked us together to like raise up some really good men that honor women, that esteem women, that make space for women. And that's my greatest joy in being a boy mom, you know?
Do you have a child between the age of, 11 and 8 by chance?
Yeah, I have 2.
Do you know what's on my mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like already thinking about her personality. I'm like, Noah,
she's
my
fierce,
oldest.
Dude.
Yeah. And he needs that, dude. He like, he loves like the like fiery,
challenge?
like, oh yeah, just like his dad. Yeah. And so
we'll share this at the wedding in the toast. We'll be absolutely. Like, remember?
You heard it here first. You heard it here first.
Oh my God.
Because I'm here for it. I'm all here for picking their wives. I'm just saying.
100%. It's literally like meant to do that. Okay. So do you feel like since you're around so many men, you're around such a powerful husband, you're around your brothers, you're around your sons, what has your journey with finding female friendships looked like? And like, has that been a total mountain to climb with just getting back into that dialect of female friendships? Like,
yeah, it has been interesting. So getting a little deep here. So my mom went to prison when I was young. I was like 5 or 6 and she was sentenced to life. So she was gone out of my life at that point. And I think I had this, when I think about like baby Jalyssa, I think that there was all these moments where I was really trying to like cling to like the women in my life. Because obviously your mom is there and then she's not, literally in an instant. And it was like, when you're a child, I had no idea my mom was going through like a trial or had committed a crime or any of those things.
Yeah.
So it was like, just dropped me off at my dad's house, never came back. And so I think that when I became like a teenager, I definitely, because I'm super close with my brothers, I definitely preferred being around boys, being around guys. My dad is like a refuge for me. And whereas like sometimes like for some of the women in my life, I felt like I had to like prove or earn something. And so I'm a very confident person because of my dad. Like every day he tells me, till this day, like he sings me songs like that I'm the queen. Like I was never a princess. I was always the queen. Like,
were you also the youngest?
No, so basically the oldest, because I have one older brother and the oldest daughter is always the oldest, right?
Wow, totally.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but he doted over me like my whole life and really built me up to think like I could do anything. I could be anything. I was the queen. Like I deserved the best. I carried that energy with me. I had some friends in high school where it always felt like this weird, like drama and it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So I determined that guys are just great and girls just suck. Like that was kind of what happened. Sure. And then I got saved and I started going to this church and I had this weird tension where like there was this guy at the church who still is so dear to my heart to this day. He officiated Nathaniel and I's wedding, but he actually introduced me to discipleship. He started just like talking, notice like there's this young girl, her family doesn't go to church, but she just always shows up here. He's talking to me. He's teaching me how to read the word. I'm like, I read the Bible and like 4 books said the same thing. And he was like, those are called the Gospels. And this is what, and like, I had no idea. I had never read a Bible in my life, I love that. But then whereas the women in the church, like, God bless them, but every time I had interactions with them, it felt like it was about my modesty. It was about being a wife one day. It was correction about something being too tight on my breast and distractions but from the guy, it was about like, you're a really gifted teacher. Like, I want to so into that. Like, hey, you should join the discipleship program. So that kind of furthered my like animosity with women of like, women are really, really weird and men are just inviting. So I have this like perspective that I think most women don't have, right? And then one day, somehow the Lord just started burdening my heart for women. I think what I was like running from because it irritated me, God kind of gave me this like desire to pursue women in spite of that, because of that. Like, this is what you don't like, especially like when I got saved and came into the church. But like, what if it is my assignment to you to break those barriers? And so I started like I moved to Germany. I got married at 20, moved to Germany with my husband. He was living out there. He's military. We started working with this ministry organization, and I would have these girls who would ask me like to have coffee or to have a lunch. And I was hesitant because again, I didn't really like women that much. And I had a really weird relationship with my mom. Like, there was a lot of unhealthy things there.
Naturally play a place in that.
Yeah, exactly. And whereas with my dad, he always felt like safe to me,
Totally.
And so I started like meeting with these girls. Mind you, I'm young, I'm 20, but I think that the Lord had just given me a love for his word from the moment I got saved at 17. And that kind of was showing itself. I realized that like they actually were wanting like the same thing I was wanting. That was just to know the Lord. And so from that moment forward, I just started not just making myself available to women, but really pursuing women, to where like I ended up working in women's ministry and hosting women's ministry events, and like my house from like that young age when I had like, I think about my first little house, 3-bedroom, like 1,000 square foot house, to like now has just been filled and flooded with like women who just want to know the Lord or who want to understand marriage. And I have a lot of unpopular like ideas that kind of challenge some of the like purity culture and some of the like
sure
women need to be quiet mentalities. And I think that like women find freedom in that. And so now it's like relationships with women like fuels me. It makes me feel like I have purpose, and motherhood gives me purpose and all of these things. But I feel like there's this unique assignment that God has given me. And I have to say, part of my salvation story, my friend's mom kind of made us go to this youth retreat before she could spend the night at my house for my birthday one year. I was turning 17.
I love it.
Girl, and I thought it was a cult. It was really weird. It was like all these kids.
We all have that thought at one point.
Right. I went, I'm like, none of them look like me. They're all like doing these weird like stances of worship. Like, it was wild. And at that retreat, this lady came up to me and she gave me what I didn't know then, but I know now is like a prophetic word. And part of her word was that she felt like God, mind you, I never met this lady. She's from Seattle. She's a guest speaker in California at this event. And she felt like God gave her this vision for me. And part of it, like the short story of it, was that all that he was preserving me for was because he had a unique assignment on my life to sow into generations of women, and that he needed me to be kept so that I could be a voice for women that have gone before me and women who will come after me. And every part, I went home a couple of days later, that was like daunting, like plaguing my thoughts. And I asked the Lord into my heart, into my bedroom one night with my best friend. And I've been rocking with the Lord ever since. But in that, I see pieces of that word constantly coming to pass, especially for me, who felt like the most unlikely for that to be my story.
When I look at you, I think you are such a girl's girl. Like, obviously knowing you're surrounded around men, but I'm always like, man, she loves girls. Like,
I do.
And it's just, it's so on you. I love that. I want to go back into sharing about your mom a little bit, because I think that so plays into why you're a girl's girl.
Yeah.
And so your mom went to prison when you were 6. Is she still there, or is she out?
No. So my mom got out by the grace of God, truly like an act of the Lord. She was sentenced to a life without the possibility of parole sentence. And I want to say when I was about 21, I kind of like partnered with her and some organizations, and we just petitioned the governor of California for years. To hear her case and to reconsider. And he did in 2018. Her
Dang, I had
sentence
no
got commuted.
idea.
Yeah. So it's about 7 years of working for that. But the Lord really, like, I mean, it
So
was,
did you have a relationship with her your whole life through a phone?
yeah. Yeah. So we had 1 week phone calls, we had to call collect,
Yes,
things were
sir.
different back then. And she was in a prison that was about 5 hours away. So I didn't see her maybe but once a year. Sometimes. And yeah, it was interesting. I think there was phases like when you're a little girl and you're like, oh, mommy, my mommy. And then you get to this point where you're like, you're my mom because I came out of your vagina, but that's about it. Like, and then you get this animosity. And then my mom and I are like mirrors, right? But in the most strange way possible.
How long did it take you to learn that?
Until very recently, actually.
Really?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey because I realized like I really had a lot of anger and
Sure.
disappointment and even embarrassment when it
Sure.
came to my mom. But, one day I'm driving with my husband and my mom and I, we had a lot of tension in our relationship. One, we couldn't be more different and we couldn't be more the same. So it's just weird to
Yeah.
navigate,
Yeah.
and it, without going into it, my mom, she comes from a lot of trauma and hardship. And my story is very different than hers. One day I'm driving with my husband and I'm just like, about my mom,
Sure.
and he was like, yeah, I know she could be really hard. And he was like, it's interesting though. Like when I look at you, I see her. And I was like, oh, that irritates me. My whole life I've heard that. Everybody always tells me that. And he was like, but not even just in like your physical appearance and your mannerisms, but in the things like your character, your like voice, like the power that is in you. And he was like, I often wonder if your mom was stewarded better, would you and her actually be sharing the same story? Would you actually have very similar journeys? And it was really, really humbling and gave me this new measure of grace for my mom. And like, wow, I would see anybody else in the world through that lens. Like, I want to pursue the heart of this woman. I want to pray over her. I want to cover her. But when it's like somebody in your family, it's personal, right?
Yeah, so
And
different.
so, yeah, it changed my perspective because not only did it allow me to see her for what she could have been, it also allowed me to see me for what I could have been.
Yeah.
Everything about her that I want to judge or critique could have been my story too.
Sure,
And
grace.
that's really humbling, that's
Oh,
really
dude.
humbling. So we have a great relationship as of today.
Oh, great. Okay, tell me
But
more about that. So when she got out,
yeah,
was it like we just instantly like
no,
how do you introduce
I
her to your
know.
children? Like
I
what is
know.
the attachment process with a woman behind
Yeah.
bars and
Yeah.
you, a woman that's all over the world?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, friend, it was really hard. I remember like going to pick up my mom and like watching her like leave the van. They dropped her
So
off at
you're the one that picked her
prison.
up.
Yeah, me and my brothers and my
Okay.
cousin. And because she went to prison, her parents have died, didn't have a husband or anything. And so,
I bet
and
your
she
heart
actually,
was just like
oh yeah, and she actually gave birth to my youngest brother in prison. So they've never
wow.
like had a life together,
Oh.
And so I thought it was going to be one way when she came home, and it wasn't. And I
And
think
what did you think
that
it was gonna be?
I thought she was going to be like a grandma, like a
Okay.
abuela, like how
Sure. Yeah.
I like her mom to me, my abuelita. I love her so much. She's so sweet. She cooks for me. She,
Yeah.
up until she passed away, I thought my mom was going to kind of step into this role
Roll
that
right
she had
away.
like talked about all the time, longed for all those things. She also had her own perspective. She thought
Sure.
she was coming home to be a mom, where this tension of like, well, I don't really need a mom like that. I'm
I've
not
been
like
doing this
six anymore.
20 years. Yeah.
Like I've actually done a lot. Like I like own my houses and I have all this experience. I've lived in and out of the country. I've traveled the world. I'm
Right.
pregnant with my fourth baby. Like, I've helped raise your son. Like I'm good on that. Whereas for her, I think she actually had to get to know herself. And I don't know that me and my brothers initially gave her much space for that. Is like acknowledging like what you're supposed to be for us and not who you're supposed to be for yourself, or just learning who you are, learning.
Yeah.
Friend, we went to a restaurant. My mom used a fork for the first time in over 20 years. They don't have metal forks. They don't have forks in prison. That's a weapon. Like
perspective, dude.
Right. And so I think just the adjusting, and then just like, I think oftentimes when we have expectations on people, it makes us very entitled. So because I expect this from you, I feel entitled to this from you, whether it be behavior, time, resources, any of the things. And I think what I learned is that there was this sense of entitlement to, well, you're my mom, and so you should come back and be the better one in the relationship, or the stronger one in the relationship, or the more available one in the relationship. And I felt like maybe I became entitled to this version of her that I expected. Whereas later I learned that it was most important that she found God and found who she was in him. Because I'm always preaching this to women. It's like, what our marriages and our businesses, our careers, our children, our friends get from us is the overflow of who we are as a woman. But I wasn't offering my mom that same grace.
Right.
And so stepping back and acknowledging that, because we had a lot of tension in our relationship, and my mom, she a little Mexican gangster. Okay. She don't play
Totally.
So it was just, and I'm not used to that. I'm like very gentle. My dad's so gentle with me. And so it was so much learning each other, that in the learning each other, it felt like this is too much. I actually did fine without you for over 20 years. I could be fine without you for the rest of my life. Enjoy your life.
Totally.
And then in stepped Jesus, burdening my heart for her in a way that was so convicting, because I'm so just adamant about pursuing the hearts of women,
Yeah.
How could I not offer that to my own mom? And so we just started like, hey, these are the boundaries, or hey, this is what will work. And like little by little tiptoeing into a relationship. And now we're like really, really close. And we're like, we can actually learn so much from each other, because God literally, like, I am in her image, literally,
Yeah.
And so, and there's so much other deeper, like, family dynamics that played a role into that.
Totally.
I think played a role into my mindset and stuff. But ultimately, I want to see her in eternity, and the heart that I have for women, I share for her. And I don't think that I did originally.
Yeah.
So,
for sure. I think that's a good point, saying like, because when you have these unvoiced expectations on people, because that same exact thing happens with the Lord. When we have this unvoiced expectation of how things are going to go, and then in comes reality of how life actually plays out. And then that's why people have this, shallow, lukewarm walk with him, is because they're, So I so admire your ability to just like really like use forgiveness as a shield, and like really like putting you before you. Family dynamics are brutal.
Yes, they're so hard.
It's hard because you're like, I share DNA with you. You are so irreplaceable to me. No matter what you do or who you become, I love you.
Yeah.
And yet you don't know who I am. You don't know what's in me. You don't know gifts on my life. You don't know, like, in time you're sitting at this table and you're like, you're not the ones that are, like you said last week, crying, beating on the floor, praying with me. You're not, just naturally, that's usually not the people that you're fighting in the spirit with.
Right.
These other people. So like, you just want to bring your broken self with family and hope that they'll like accept it. But then all of a sudden you step back and you're like, dang, I actually need to love you the way that I love all these other people. Like
the strangers
the gospel pertains to you. And it's like, oh, I so admire that. I can't imagine having that story. And just even like that line of, okay, I need to protect my children from this, because I don't, but then also I don't, because there's this invitation of letting them experience the Lord in this family dynamic. And so it just requires so much prayer. Okay. I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Something that I think about when I think of you is how your mom is full Hispanic and your father is Black, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I think about this, because this happens a lot in adoption, like, Zach is mixed, like this dynamic where when you have two of these very pronounced cultures and you were raised by predominant, your Black father, did you cling more to that culture? Because when I think of you, I think so much Spanish, like
Yeah.
you're fluent in Spanish too, right?
Yeah. At this point in my life, I'm fluent in Spanglish because I don't ever use it. And I like literally am
And at
losing it
one
little
point,
by
were
little.
you?
Yeah. And it's so funny because Nathaniel's cousin just texted me today. Like, I know you're really trying to get back on your Spanish. I learned you could use AI. So I'm like literally just this morning, like using AI to like help me with
Cheating.
my
You're
Spanish.
cheating.
No, literally like AI will speak to you in Spanish so that you can practice with them.
Oh, I
Weird,
thought you
right?
were
I
using
know.
it as like Google Translator.
Oh,
Okay.
no. Like they'll speak to you like, hey, speak to me in Spanish. Tell me this in Spanish. And it will
Oh.
like,
So do you
yeah,
understand it when it's speaking to
yeah,
you?
so I can understand Spanish very well. Speaking it back, I could read it well. Speaking it back is the problem. So, okay, I'm like truly biracial in that. Even to
I
my
love
dad,
that.
he's like, "Girl, you are not black." Because
Okay.
I'm like, I
Talk to us
love,
about it.
I love both of my cultures very much. I really do. I think that what initially made me cling to Mexican culture is so my mom's mom was like the love of my life. Like truly loved my abuelita. Like she
Special.
was so special to me. And I spent a lot of my childhood with her. And so, which is where like the Spanish came from, the love for the culture, the music that, and she was
The food.
also
Can we not
the
forget the
food. Yeah,
food?
because, I cook so much Mexican food.
Wait, was that
So
sarcasm?
no, like I literally cook
Same.
mostly Mexican
Yeah.
food.
Okay, good.
And so my son one day he was like, "Mommy, like we're black, but we eat a lot of Mexican food."
You're like
And
carne
so
asada, just like enjoy,
on
baby.
everything,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, I think initially my clinging to the culture was because I really loved and my grandpa, my mom's dad, my abuela, he was a mariachi. Like he played the music, he taught me how to play maraca, the harmonica, all the things. And I can remember all the little songs we would make up together, all the things. And so I was just really like a little like their little black grandbaby.
Yeah.
But then as I grew up, I think what really, and I can see this now, but it was in that kind of like void of like wanting to be attached to something that I loved my Mexican culture because like I have wonderful women in my life. Like I have an incredible stepmom. I have an amazing aunt, like people who really loved me, poured into me, loved me like in that filling
Yeah.
that void. But
Yeah.
there were so many obvious things that I didn't come from them. There were so many things that are obvious about that
Like what?
personality, looks like, I can just see the way that their daughters are so much like them, look
Okay.
like them, talk like
Okay.
them, mannerisms like them, think like them. I mean,
Did
so
that ever
much.
disappoint you? Like, did you
You know,
ever, as a kid, think, "Oh, I want to be more, this way"?
yeah, for sure. For sure. I did. And I think that's why I clung to like Mexican culture because it was like in a way me like holding on to something that is my mom. And it's funny because my mom always says I'm more Mexican than her because she's like, I'm not
That's what I
even
was
that Mexican.
thinking. How you were like
Yeah.
holding on to it because you didn't have her, and that was your
Yeah.
way of
Yeah.
like
That was like, it
tethered
was
to
like,
culture.
absolutely. And like, I love Selena. Like when I was growing up, that
Oh,
was like my favorite movie.
100%.
And we watched it all the time. And I used to tell myself like, oh, my mom looks like Selena. And I
She
thought that was
does.
she does, right? Like
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool. And so I think like I carry both cultures very strong. Like my boys, they have Spanish tutors. We do like 2 days out of the week,
I
all
was just
Spanish
gonna ask,
TV.
do they speak
Yeah.
it? Okay,
Yeah.
so
That like
cool.
my oldest used to go to a like Spanish immersion school. Like,
Love
and I
that.
just think that a part of that for me is keeping my abuelos alive because they were so Mexican.
It's so important.
And I don't know. I just think being biracial is really fun. Like
So powerful, and when
it's
you
so
have, like,
fun.
those people, even hearing, like, that your mom's parent came and filled that void and continued to, like,
Yeah.
breathe that culture. Because my husband, didn't know his biological father, and so
Yeah.
he always wanted that, like, that
That
culture to be
culture.
followed by.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's so special to see the way that that's been celebrated over you and that you continue to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And I know it's like pick a side or what do you, and I'm naturally like, I was raised in Black culture, but I also
Right,
was raised in Southern California where
right.
everything is very Mexican culture. And
Hispanic,
so
yeah, are you kidding?
literally it's like an extension of Mexico. Like,
Right.
so yeah, I think that I celebrate it and I never felt this obligation to be more Black because
That's cool.
I love it. I love being biracial, and I'm like black
I
and
love that.
Mexican. Like both cultures are so lit, so I get
100%.
to just have a good time all the time. So
I love that. Oh gosh. Okay, so before when we were talking, I asked you what you felt like your life message was.
yeah,
What do
yeah,
you feel like I know we kind of talked about your call to women and
yeah,
surrounded around men and raising up world changers of men, but also calling up the identity and power of women.
yeah,
And what else do you feel like is like something that you feel just like you want to shout to the world about? It's something that
yeah.
God's breathed on you.
Man, I think that I have been thinking so much lately about the kindness of God and the faithfulness of God. And so I didn't like grow up in the church. Like, I grew up with an understanding that there was a God, but not like never read the scriptures, wasn't like, excuse me, a part of like a church community, things like that. I found the Lord when I was 17, or like it really feels like God found me. Like it really
Yeah,
feels like he came for me. Like, girl. And
love
it's
that.
crazy because I was in the shower one day and I just started weeping. And I was like, oh, the overwhelming, never ending, reckless love of God. Like the lyrics of that song were just playing in my mind. Like before you spoke the world, you were speaking over me. When I tell you that could not be more true. When I was younger, I was talking to my mom and, she was a teen. My parents had me and my older brother in high school and she was going to abort me. And she like vividly like recalls that there was this almost like voice of God that like stopped her. Like she was at the
Wow.
clinic. Um, my the other side of that story was like my Wello was like at the house, like with his rosary, like praying that she wouldn't do what she was about to
Wow.
do. My dad was like, something woke him up, like something's happening, like that's not supposed to be happening. And so when I tell you from that moment forward, I can trace the
That is your song.
fingerprint of God
Yeah.
absolutely on every part of my life. I think like there was a point where like my parents couldn't, my mom was in prison, my dad wasn't able to like take care of us for a season. And like we didn't go into foster care. We didn't go with strangers. Like we went with my aunt, like, and her husband, my uncle, who are so loving and such a part of our journey. Really, so much of the mom that I am is because of her, my
Wow.
auntie. And I think of all of these things. Like when I tell you, like there was times when I was in high school when I thought about doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing. And like somebody, like a random person, like was like, this isn't for you. Like, let's not do
Angel.
this. And
It's an
literally
angel.
protected me. Like I was like, I had all these like moments where I see God's fingerprint on my life and I was weeping. And I feel like he has preserved me in such a way that people often will say, oh, that was so hard when they hear about my childhood or my story or different things, even
Sure.
in my adult life. I almost died giving birth to my son. And I think I was waking up every night at about 3 a.m. for some reason throughout that pregnancy. And I just started using that time to pray. Well, my mentor had told me like a little bit before the birth that she was also my doula, waking up in the middle of the night. And the Lord was urging her to pray over me. And there was this verse in Isaiah that said like, shall I bring you through labor and not deliver? And she was praying that verse over me. Sure enough, I go into labor. We're laboring through, we're praying that verse over me. I almost die. My baby almost dies. And the doctor in a miraculous way saves my life. I think about God has just preserved me and kept me. And so all of that to say, there's often times, especially my husband and I and our family have been in the hardest season of our entire lives this last like year, maybe two
Really?
years, honestly.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It has just been like what feels like we worked really hard to build this beautiful home.
Yeah.
And without like any really doing of our own, something just plowed it all down. And we're like standing there, like looking at the shambles, like all
Wow.
the rubble. But what I realized in that picture that I saw of us is that like we were still very firm on this foundation. And it was like now opportunity to rebuild, but with what we see we should do different or maybe didn't do last time. And I acknowledged in that faith is not this journey of just always being like happy, always like I'll become even more dignified than this type praise moments. But faith is acknowledging that even still, like God is with us, that
Mm.
he is the foundation and whatever comes from that foundation well, it doesn't, like, it won't always be with ease. It won't always stand tall. Like right now, I
Right.
feel like I'm standing in the rubble, but the
Yeah.
foundation is still intact. And the grace of God is actually in allowing us to rebuild, is in allowing us to see him even in the midst of that. And so something that has just really been on my heart is like, what does it mean to have gratitude, to like maintain your faith, and to know like God deeply? And I feel like some of the conclusions that I've come to is like, one, burying my faith in the scriptures has been a part of my journey since I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, I grew up in church, or I was always even in a church. Like my husband and I spent a good portion of our faith journey, like just doing Bible studies, whatever military base we were on in our home,
Right.
It is just in bearing my faith in the scriptures and actually like going from this place of just like loving the idea of Jesus to actually fearing God, and this idea of like believing in a God to believing God, taking him at his word. And from that like flows faith. And so there's so many moments, Ebie, where I'm like, something has got to give. Like, God, where are you?
Yeah.
Why is it this way? Why
Yeah.
does it have to be loss after loss, hardship after hardship, trauma after trauma? But acknowledging that he is so kind that even still he will work those things together. Then on the other side of it, I look more and more like him. I become
Yeah.
more and more like him. So
Yeah.
that burdening on my heart to love my mom well, that comes from my time in the scriptures. That comes from my time of like being refined through the hardship. That desire that I have to see women like thrive in their God-given calling and gifting without like comparing, without the drama, without all of the tension that can be in women's relationships. That comes from me watching how Jesus dealt with the woman at the well. That comes from me watching Solomon put his mom on a throne right beside him. That comes from me acknowledging who women are to God, who my mom is to God, who my children are to God. And then this relinquishing of control and this like clinging to faith, that faith is not just dancing undignified before the people, but faith is also writing psalms in the cave. And that has been like really what has been burdening my heart lately.
Oh man, I feel the Holy Spirit on that, Jalyssa. That's
Mhm.
so good. Oh man, that's so good. It reminds me, while you're talking, the thing that kept coming to my mind was Psalms 1. Like, I will be sitting by the river and I'll grow fruit in every season. Like,
Yes.
though I'll sit in the seat of scornful, like no matter where I find myself, every single season, I will bear
Yes.
fruit because I'm by the
Yes.
river of him. That's so good.
Absolutely.
We were just had a couple that last week when we did your episode, and I had all those girls over that night.
Oh,
One of
yeah.
the girls was sharing a revelation that she had, and so I can't even claim that this is mine, but she was sharing about that when Lazarus dies and Mary and Martha, and everyone's like, I feel like my mentor always says, honestly, like obviously we always want to be like Mary, but I
Right.
feel like Martha sometimes gets a bad rap because it was her authority that allowed for Mary's intimacy. So that's a whole
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
But they talk about how, Jesus comes back and he weeps with them because it was
Yeah.
his friend, but also because he felt the weight of their loss in that
Yeah.
moment. And then one of the verses, it says, and then Jesus calls for Mary.
Yeah.
And she said that popped out in her, like, because she was like, well, what if I was a woman that Jesus literally called for? Like,
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
so much you could unwrap from that, but like
Yeah.
that he calls for her. And then the next chapter is when it's Mary who washes his feet with oil and expensive
Yeah.
fragrance, and it's like
Yeah.
that unleashing of generosity. It is overflowing from a heart of gratitude. Like that's
Mm.
the natural response of overwhelming gratitude is
Yep.
generosity, And so I
Yeah.
see that on your life, like you are so overflowing with gratitude that you're generous with your time with women. You're generous with your time with your children. Like
Mm.
I see gratitude on your life.
Mm.
It's beautiful. And you see even
Thank
how
you.
you say you recognize where you should have been.
Yeah.
And that's why you have grace for your mom, because you're like, I would be right there. Like it
Yes.
is by the grace of God. I'm so thankful. And that propels me to love this woman. That propels me to love my family. That propels me to not cast my judgment, but bring her in close and bring them in
Absolutely.
close. Like you walk it out, dude.
Yeah.
Just
Thank you. It is
hear that.
truly the grace of God. Like it is. And even you saying that about gratitude, I would agree with you 1,000,000%. I was talking to a friend a couple months ago and she was like, man, like, how do you maintain joy? Like in these seasons of hardship that I've been in, I have had a really hard time finding joy. And I was like thinking, what is it, Lord? Like, because I genuinely am not like taken out by these hardships. And what I realize is actually gratitude.
Mm.
Gratitude like connects me to joy because like every day there is some manna. There is some measure of manna in each day. And even like if by night the manna's gone and you're like, I really hope he gives it to me again in the morning, you know that he will. You
Yeah.
know that he will. And so like taking those measures of being like, what is my manna for today? Sometimes my manna for the day is actually literally that me and my children have breath in our lungs.
Yeah.
And that feels like the biggest blessing in the world.
Right.
Like those things that we think are owed to us, those things that we think like that will just happen tomorrow.
Denied to many.
Denied to many. And I see that and I'm so grateful. Like, how could I not be grateful for the kindness of God in my life that my husband is asleep next to me when like all of these people we know from this pilot school that we used to be stationed, 3 of their husbands are gone from a training accident. Like, how can I not be grateful watching these women who've buried their children praise God even still? How could I not be grateful? And I think that you're so right. It is in this like one, it requires hecka humility
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be like, God owes me nothing but the breath in my children's lungs this day is
The
everything.
cross was enough.
The cross, if the Lord literally rose from the grave and if he never did anything again, he has done more than enough.
Yeah.
Everything else is addition. Everything
Right.
else is privilege. And I
Right.
just really want to like, I want to like use my privilege, which is grace, well, to, you know what I mean? To serve and to give to others. And I tell my boys, I pray over them and I give them their affirmations every day. And at the end of our prayer, I say, everybody take a deep breath. Now, God, may we use the breath to return you praise in everything that we do this day. And that is the position of my heart. And I think that keeps me, you know, I think it
I
keeps
love
me.
that. Oh, I love that. Okay. So I want to end it with this. You're saying that you've been in a 2-year season of challenge.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to go into detail of what the challenge is, but being in war, what would you say? Gratitude is one strategy, but what for somebody in a season that's like,
Yeah.
no, Ebie, like you don't get it, like, or Jalyssa, like she's got a husband, she's got kids, or she's got,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you know, because we all listen to these
Mhm.
podcasts and we're like, there's a chunk of everything that's
Absolutely.
relatable but unrelatable, you know.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to someone that's in war? What is this war
Yeah.
strategy that they could implement that you have learned?
Yeah. Oh man. So actually it's been 3 years now. I'm realizing, okay, we're in
Woo.
2024. So really
Okay.
like it's been for a while. And I would say, because I do acknowledge, like I said this on my own podcast, like I am not every woman. Like, you know, I acknowledge that. And that's why, like, even on my podcast, it's an interview podcast to hold space for all the women and all their journeys. But one thing that we can all like consistently relate on is the cross. And I know it sounds so like Christianese and so simple and people want this huge revelation and this huge like how to do this. And I'm not like, I'm never going to produce this, like how to mother this way, how to wife this way. But one thing that I can say is if we suffer at the feet of Jesus, he will not return our suffering void. If we can really hone in on, like I've been talking about this for so long, but this Romans 8:28, this God working all things together for our good is not this measure of ease and lack of suffering. It is not God is going to make life feel good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. He's going to work all things together. And to him, that means that we just look more like Jesus. To him, that's holiness. And so my one, and I say this to everybody and I feel like I disappoint them with this, but get one in the scriptures, bury your face in the scriptures because you can, and not like, oh God, where am I in this story? But where are you in every part of this book? When we read Samuel, we want to see ourselves in David. When we read Hosea, we want to point the finger at the wife and be like, you the prostitute and I'm the savior. Like we always want to see ourselves, but no. Who is God? Wash yourself in the word. Who was God to David? Who was God to Hosea? Who was God to Jonah? Who was God to the Israelites, to Priscilla and Aquila, to Deborah? Who was God to them? And in trusting that God is very much still the same and is very much unchanging, I know that he will be that version of himself for me in whatever season I'm in and whatever I need. He's Jehovah Jireh when I need a provider. Does that mean that the money is flowing? No, but he's providing peace. He's providing manna, and that is more than enough. And so I think that when we know the word, we know God, and we know and translate who he is to them, to who he will be to us, and we filter our suffering through that. And then the second piece of that is you have to be in community. If Moses went up to that hill on his own, he would have dropped his arms because he was weary. But it was in his bringing of Aaron and Hur that he was able to accomplish that hard task.
Yeah.
When you said it on my podcast last week, and it has wrecked the masses. This is like the one thing that everybody keeps talking about. Jesus asked his disciples, the three, to come keep watch. If not for those around us, Ecclesiastes 4 tells us 2 are better than 1, for when one falls, the other is there to pick him up. But woe to the person who is alone, for when they fall, who is there? Sis, like in your suffering, like surround yourself with people who are going to call you forth as that thing. I always talk about the metamorphosis process and how in the process, the caterpillar goes into the cocoon and it liquefies, it becomes nothing. But if that cocoon is not built well, it will seep out in its nothingness and it will never emerge the butterfly. As women, we spend so much of our life as that liquefied substance, just like waiting and wanting to be knit together so that we can emerge. So if we're not wrapping our cocoons tight enough with the word, with community, with the Aarons and the Hurs, with the 3 disciples, then we will seep out and we'll never emerge the woman that God has called us to be. And so wrap your cocoon tight, wrap
it's like,
your cocoon
better
tight.
to say that than the girl who's lived in 19 different places. Because I can already hear people hearing this and saying, you don't get it. I'm a military wife. I'm moving every 2 years. I can't root myself and build relationships. But that piece of finding those ride or dies to keep watch while it's an absolute game changer.
It's a game changer.
Last week too, how like it's those people that are picking your booty up. It's those people that are saying, this is why you married that man and this is why you'll stay in it. It's those people that say like it. Oh, I don't know where I'd be.
I don't know where I'd be. Like, and it could be such disappointment when you, like I said, you expect it to be one thing, but we have to have our hands and our hearts open to God doing it in a different way. When my husband and I got engaged, we grew up together, right? So I was like, I'm staying in California for my whole life. I'm never leaving my family.
Totally, yeah.
You need to get out of the military. Like, I'm a California girl. Like, this is my life forever. Like, yes. And if God in his grace did not shut me up and do what he's done with my life, I don't know where I'd be. Yeah, because you know what it is? You know who my people are? Who they're not people that I'm like blood related to. The people that are on their face praying with me through hardship, the people who were laying hands on me as I was bleeding out in labor, I was surrounded by everybody who God has brought into my life. And so be open, to that looking a different kind of way. 100%. Absolutely. Because God is everywhere. God was in Germany when I was there. God was in Nicaragua when I was there. God was in Albuquerque and in Alabama and in California, and he's here in Arizona. God was with me when I was crying on a bathroom floor because my mom wasn't ever coming home at 6 years old. God was with me when I was weeping and grieving the loss of family member after family member, person after person. God was with me when I was miscarrying a baby on a bathroom floor. God was with me when my ultrasound showed 1 baby and no more 2. God was with me when my mom came out of the prison doors. God was with me every part of that journey. He was the same God. He was the same God. And would I have written that story for myself? No. Am I so grateful? And it's so wild to say this. Last thing I'll say, the song Refiner? right?
Oh yeah. I was just singing it
Dude,
this morning. Chandler.
I hated that song when it came
I
out.
was like, that's a dangerous
This
prayer,
is a
y'all.
dangerous song. I was already in this
Tried
like
by
hardship.
fire? No, thank you. I've been doing
And you're
that 30
singing it.
years.
Yes, and you're singing it like this is fun, like this is cute, like this is pretty. No, 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 no. I was in church. I'm reading the lyrics on the screen. I'm already in the hard season, right? And I'm like, ugh, like who would want to sing this? And I promise you, for like 2 years straight, the song came on, I'm turning it. They're singing it at church, I'm sitting down. I want nothing to do with that song. I found myself about a month ago on my knees in worship, singing that song with a heart positioned to truly, in a weird way, I almost feel like like I'm having like a moment of like psychosis or something, because I'm like, God, I am so grateful that you are refining me. And that's even weird for me to say, but really, like, whereas now that song is so beautiful to me, because in the refining and I don't know if there's an end in sight for hardship in my life right now, or, but in that process, like God has just kept me, like he truly has been the fourth man in the fire. And so as I'm being refined, he's not gonna like, it's not like God's like letting somebody else or something else refine me and he's like hands off. He's right there. He's watching the process. He's making sure that like the diamond comes out majestic. He's making sure that like the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out unhinged. Like he truly is the refiner, but it takes an open heart and two open hands to embrace and accept that and see him in the fire, keep our eyes fixed on him so that we don't sink when he calls us to walk on water.
Girl, you're preaching. And just think, like, what a gift that we don't live by Old Testament, that we have to go sacrifice these lambs. But now, even the last, part of that bridge, it's like, Lord, here's my life. This is the sacrifice, not an animal, but this full life, this whole obedience, this.
And that's scary. That's scary. I'm still scared.
Yes. And the culture of, entertainment, and we're just watching highlight, and we're watching, beautiful endings of films, and gosh, we've just been plagued by this concept of fiction. And
absolutely.
Jesus is like, listen, I came to write and redeem and restore. Sometimes it looks a little different, and
sometimes I wreck it all, tear it all down.
Yeah.
But like if your foundation is intact, like you will stand there in the rubble and you will see the rubble as like new materials, not as like what I've lost, but like what can I do with this to rebuild? And that is because the foundation is firm,
Gosh. And I think it's even beautiful for you to say, like, your whole foundation these last 3 years have fallen down, but you're looking here and you're standing in shambles, and yet your foundation is firm. And I think a lot of people can't say that. I know that's a gift of faith on your life, because a lot of people look at rubble and just think, yep, this is a consequence of my poor choices, or this is a consequence of, or God's goodness doesn't really feel like goodness when everything's, but it's amazing. I'm like a total nerd out on theology and exegesis.
Me too. So give it to me.
Okay. So did you know the Greek word? Okay. So he comes to bring beauty for ashes, right? The Greek word for beauty is epher. The Greek word for ashes is fear, which I also think is weird. P-H-E-E-R. And beauty is E-P-H-E-R. It's the exact same letters rearranged.
Oh my gosh.
So explain to me, that is so like the Lord, to take the same sequence in the same letters and just say, listen, I'm going to rearrange this for you. All we got to do is move this here, this, boom.
Yes.
It's like,
dude, he did it with Peter. I was just like reading and thinking about Peter. Like it was in Peter's like zeal that was like, you will not die. And he's like, get behind me, Satan. It was in Peter's like zeal that he was like cutting off the ear of the person. And he's like, dude, like chill out. This is part of God's will. It was that same fire and passion in Peter that allowed the Peter of Acts to arise.
Right.
God just rearranged it.
And he needed to refine it.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah.
So I would like to say that he's just rearranging you in your season and your family and your things, but all of the things you need are in that. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. I love you so
Oh,
much.
Jalyssa,
Thank
I
you for
love you. I
this.
honor you. I love your courage. I honor you as a mom, as a woman of God. Just like you are so the real deal. I don't say that to many people. I so believe in you and the call in your life. And so thank
God
you
is
for
so
accepting
kind.
this.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I love you so much. You know, you're like my person. I just adore you. So I'm so
All
grateful
the
to be
kids get to
here.
meet Auntie Ebie and Auntie
I
Jalyssa.
know.
I love that woman. And to wrap up this episode, I just want to say where you find yourself and whatever you find yourself doing, I just pray that you are abounding in hope and that you would just find a deep interior peace today. And so, as always, if you have a minute, like the podcast, share it. It's so, so helpful and it means so much to me. It blesses me. And I hope you have the best rest of your day. Until next time.